Good morning, Falcons. It's Mr. K from the library. Today we're going to be reading Two of Everything by Lily Choi Hong. This is a Chinese folktale. Once, long ago, in a humble hut, there lived Mr. Hoktok and his wife, Mrs. Hoktok. They were old and poor. What little they ate came from their tiny garden. In a lucky year where the harvest was plentiful, Mr. Hoktok had a little extra to take to the village. There he traded turnips, potatoes, and other vegetables for clothing, lamp oil, and fresh seeds. One spring morning, when Mr. Hoktok was digging his garden, his shovel struck something hard. Puzzled, he dug deeper into the dark ground until he came upon an ancient pot made of brass. "How old," said Mr. Hoktok to himself. "To think that I have been digging here all these years and never came upon this pot before. I will take it home. Maybe Mrs. Hoktok can find some use for it." The pot was big and heavy for old Mr. Hoktok. As he stumbled along, his purse, which contained his last 5 gold coins, fell to the ground. He tossed it into the pot for safekeeping and staggered home. His wife greeted him at the door. "Dear husband, what a strange pot." Mr. Hoktok explained how he found the pot. "I wonder what we can do with it," said Mrs. Hoktok. "It looks too large to cook in and too small to bathe in." As Mrs. Hoktok leaned over to peer into the pot, her hairpin, the only one she owned, fell in. She felt around the pot, and suddenly her eyes grew round with surprise. "Look," she shouted, "I've pulled out 2 hairpins, exactly alike, and 2 purses too." Sure enough, the purses were identical. So were the hairpins. Inside each purse were 5 gold coins. Mr. Hoktok was so excited he jumped up and down. "Let's put my winter coat inside the pot. If we're lucky again, the pot will make 2 coats, and then we will both stay warm." So into the pot went 1 coat, and out came 2 coats. They began to search the house and quickly put more things into the magical pot. "If only we had some meat," wished Mr. Hoktok, "or fresh fruit, or 1 delicious sweet cake." Mr. Hoktok smiled. "I know how we can get anything we want," she said. She put their 10 coins into 1 purse and threw it into the pot. She pulled out 2 purses with 10 coins in each. "What a clever wife I have," cried Mr. Hoktok. "Each time we do this, we'll have twice as much money as before." The Hoktoks worked late into the evening, filling and emptying the pot until the floor was covered with coins. Morning came, and off went Mr. Hoktok with a long list of things to buy in the village. Instead of vegetables, his basket was full of gold coins. Mrs. Hoktok finished all her chores and sat down to enjoy a cup of tea. She sipped her tea and admired the brass pot. Then, with a grateful heart, she knelt and embraced it. "Dear pot, I do not know where you came from, but you are my best friend." She stooped over the pot to look inside. At that very moment, Mr. Hoktok returned. His arms were so full of packages that he had to kick the door open. Bang! Mrs. Hoktok was so startled she lost her balance and fell headfirst into the pot. Mr. Hoktok ran over and grabbed his wife's legs. He pulled and tugged until she slid out onto the floor, but when he looked at the pot again, he gasped. 2 more legs were sticking straight out of it. Naturally, he took hold of the ankles and pulled. Out came a second person. She looked exactly like his wife. The new Mrs. Hoktok sat silently on the floor, looking lost, but the first Mrs. Hoktok cried, "I am your one and only wife. Put that woman back into the pot right now." Mr. Hoktok yelled, "No, I'll put her back. We will have not 2 women, but 3. 1 wife is enough for me." He backed away from his angry wife and tripped and fell headfirst into the pot himself. Both Mrs. Hoktoks rushed to rescue him. Each grasped at an ankle, and together they pulled him out. There were 2 more legs in the pot, so they pulled out the other Mr. Hoktok too. "Just what use does one Mr. Hoktok have for another?" Mr. Hoktok cried angrily. "This pot is not as wonderful as we thought it to be. Now even our troubles are beginning to double." But his wife had been thinking while he was yelling. "Calm down," she said. "It's good that the other Mrs. Hoktok has her own Mr. Hoktok. perhaps we'll become best friends. After all, we're so alike, he will be like a brother to you, and she will be like a sister to me. With our pot, we can make 2 of everything, so there will be plenty to go around." And that is what they did. The Hocktocks built 2 fine new homes. Each house had identical teapots, rice bowls, silk embroideries, and bamboo furniture. From the outside, the houses looked exactly alike, but there was one difference. Hidden in one house was a big brass pot. Of course, the Hocktocks were always very careful not to fall into it again. The new Hocktocks and the old Hocktocks did become good friends. The neighbors thought that the Hocktocks had grown so rich they decided to have 2 of everything, even themselves. The end.